Beneath the surface of Earth's most alluring waters lurk forces more ancient, more powerful, and more unpredictable than anything crafted by myth. From orcas shattering glass in captive rage to hammerhead frenzies in coral sanctuaries, each story is a stark reminder. The ocean is not a theme park. It is a wild living system ruled by rules we barely understand. When people enter it, whether to play, to work, or to study, they step into a domain where dominance flips and survival becomes a matter of seconds. Here are 6 stories. For over 2 decades, the city's premier marine attraction had been a major draw for tourists, operating smoothly without major incident. Situated in Russia's 3rd largest city, the facility notably expanded in 2013 by acquiring 3 orcas from the waters near Kamchatka. The largest, a male named Vakru by his handlers, had become the centerpiece of the aquarium's twice-daily performance shows. Local citizens and visitors alike marveled at the massive creature, though wildlife activists had long criticized the undersized tank that housed the 6-ton animal. On the brisk morning of February 17, 2017, Klavdia Vasilyeva prepared her 3 children, Timofey, 9, Valeria, 7, and Rodion, 5, for what was supposed to be a memorable family outing. As a single mother working 2 jobs, she rarely had a full day to spend with her children. The aquarium's winter promotion offered affordable admission, and the Orca show had been advertised extensively on local television. The 11 a.m. performance began like any other. The viewing gallery was packed with approximately 200 spectators, most standing against the massive acrylic panel that separated them from the 850,000-gallon tank. The Vasilyev children pressed their faces against the cool surface, mesmerized by Vakru's graceful movements as his trainers directed him through a series of behaviors. Dmitry Kovalchuk, the lead trainer with 8 years of experience, later reported that Vakru had seemed unusually agitated that morning. The orca had refused several commands during the pre-show checkup and had been swimming in tight, aggressive circles. Following protocol, Kovalchuk had consulted with facility veterinarian Yelena Morozova, who suggested proceeding with caution but saw no immediate reason to cancel the performance. 34 minutes into the show, Vakru completed a spinning breach, splashing the audience to delighted applause. As the applause died down, security footage later revealed that the orca suddenly veered from his choreographed route and accelerated directly toward the viewing panel. Witnesses described a horrifying cracking sound that reverberated through the gallery as Vakru's massive head made contact with the acrylic wall. The impact created an immediate spiderweb of fractures across the supposedly shatterproof barrier. For approximately 12 seconds, water began seeping through the cracks as parents grabbed their children and backed away. Then, with a thunderous explosion of pressurized water, the panel gave way entirely. The subsequent investigation determined that maintenance records had been falsified, and the acrylic panel, designed to be replaced every 5 years, had been in service for nearly 8. Material fatigue combined with the orca's 3-ton force of impact proved catastrophic. The Vasilyev children, who had been seated on a bench directly in front of the tank for a better view, were among the first hit by the torrent. Many witnessed the moment when 500,000 gallons of frigid seawater knocked them unconscious and swept them into the space now shared with the disoriented orca. Pyotr Nemov, an off-duty paramedic who had brought his nephew to the show, later described the scene as pure chaos. As the water level stabilized between the tank and gallery, Vakru found himself partially beached in shallow water amid screaming spectators. Trainers desperately tried reaching the animal with control signals, but in his confused state, Vakru thrashed violently, his massive tail sweeping a path of destruction through the debris. The Vasilyev children regained consciousness in this nightmare scenario. Rodion, the youngest, suffered the most severe injuries when Vakru's teeth clamped onto his lower leg, causing compound fractures of both tibia and fibula before releasing him. Timofey received deep lacerations across his back when the orca's pectoral fin pinned him against the remnants of a concession stand. Valeria sustained a collapsed lung and broken collarbone from the initial water impact. First responders arrived 6 minutes after the collapse, but aquarium staff had already formed a human chain to retrieve the injured children. Trainer Svetlana Orlova suffered 3 broken ribs during the rescue effort, but managed to pull Rodion to safety while her colleagues distracted the increasingly agitated Orca. The children were airlifted to a regional children's medical center in Novosibirsk, where they underwent emergency surgeries. The hospital director, Dr. Arkady Zhuravlev, informed waiting media that all 3 children had survived, but would face months of physical rehabilitation. Rodion, in particular, would require reconstructive surgeries over the coming years to regain function in his injured leg. Meanwhile, Aquarium staff worked desperately to keep Vakru alive, continuously pouring water over his exposed body until emergency equipment could be assembled to return him to the undamaged holding tank. The Orca survived the ordeal but was euthanized 3 months later after developing systemic infections that veterinarians attributed to injuries sustained during the incident. The subsequent investigation revealed a pattern of negligence far beyond the maintenance failures. Internal documents showed that Vakru had displayed increasingly aggressive behaviors in the months leading up to the incident, with 3 documented instances of charging the viewing panel during non-performance hours. These reports had been suppressed by management, who feared losing their star attraction. In the aftermath, sweeping new regulations were introduced nationwide to oversee marine mammal facilities more strictly. The leading marine attraction in Novosibirsk was permanently closed following criminal charges against 6 senior managers and the owner, Mikhail Fedoseev, who was sentenced to 7 years in prison for criminal negligence resulting in grievous bodily harm. As for the Vasilyev family, they became reluctant advocates for ending Orca captivity. In a statement released through their attorney 1 year after the incident, Klavdia Vasilyeva remarked that her children's suffering had at least forced a necessary conversation about the ethics of keeping such intelligent creatures confined for human entertainment. The family ultimately received a settlement of 42 million rubles, or approximately $730,000 at the time, which was placed in trust for the children's future medical needs and education. The incident remains the worst accident in the history of captive marine mammal facilities, and is frequently cited in international debates regarding the ethics of keeping orcas in captivity. The rugged coastline of a large town in Western Australia had long been considered one of Australia's premier surfing destinations, drawing enthusiasts from across the globe to test their skills against its challenging breaks. The remote Preveli Point, located 6 kilometers from the main tourist beaches, had gained legendary status among serious surfers for its consistent swells and relative isolation. Few knew these waters better than 19-year-old Zephyr Thornhill, Western Australia's junior surfing champion and Olympic hopeful. In the pre-dawn hours of March 12, 2009, Zephyr arrived at the secluded beach for his daily training session. His coach, retired pro surfer Barrett McInnes, had scheduled a video analysis later that afternoon, and Zephyr wanted to perfect a particularly difficult aerial maneuver before their meeting. He had attached his new GoPro camera to the nose of his custom-made shortboard to capture footage from multiple angles. Conditions that morning were ideal. Light offshore winds created clean 3-meter swells with hollow barrels that broke consistently over the shallow reef. Zephyr paddled out alone while his friend Lachlan Everett watched from the limestone cliffs above, having agreed to meet him for breakfast after the session. Lachlan later told investigators that nothing seemed unusual about the water conditions, though he did recall noticing several seabirds diving unusually close to the surf zone. Marine biologists later determined that an unseasonal school of Australian salmon had moved inshore that week, attracting a female great white shark estimated to be 5.2 meters in length. The shark had been tracked by researchers 2 days earlier, but had since moved beyond their monitoring range. At approximately 6:37 a.m., Lachlan observed Zephyr paddling into position for a wave that presented a perfect ramp for his practiced aerial. As Zephyr executed the pop-up maneuver, rising from his chest to his feet in one fluid motion, the great white breached directly beneath him. Lachlan's testimony described the surreal moment when both surfer and predator became airborne simultaneously, the shark's massive jaws closing around Zephyr's midsection, while still 2 meters above the water's surface. The attack happened with such devastating speed that Zephyr had no opportunity to react. The combined force of the shark's momentum and body weight drove both back into the water with catastrophic impact. The predator immediately descended into deeper water with its prey. Red foam marked the spot where Zephyr had disappeared. Lachlan immediately called emergency services while scrambling down the cliff face to the beach. First responders arrived within 22 minutes, but by then all that remained on the surface were fragments of Zephyr's surfboard, the fiberglass torn apart along a jagged central line, and a small oil slick of blood diffusing into the turquoise water. The search operation continued for 3 days, involving police divers, helicopter surveillance, and drone teams. Zephyr's body was never recovered. The only additional evidence retrieved was the waterproof GoPro housing, which had detached from the surfboard during the attack. When authorities reviewed the footage, they discovered the final 3 minutes of Zephyr's life: calm, blue-green water sliding beneath the board, the shadow of his paddling arms, and then an explosion of white water as the recording abruptly ended. Dr. Elena Kowalski, a marine predator specialist, studied these details extensively and classified the incident as an extremely rare vertical predatory strike typically seen in seal hunting behavior at deep water colonies. The specialist noted that the shark had approached from directly below, using the sun's glare on the water surface as concealment, a hunting technique never before documented in attacks on surfers. The unprecedented nature of the attack sent shockwaves through the global surfing community. Competitive surfers had always acknowledged the risks associated with their sport, but the calculated efficiency of this particular predation method raised disturbing new concerns about vulnerability during aerial maneuvers. 6 months after their son's death, Maxwell and Ophelia Thornhill established a foundation dedicated to ocean safety, which funded the installation of real-time sonar detection systems at 5 major surf breaks in Western Australia. The foundation also developed educational programs in collaboration with marine biologists to help surfers understand shark behavior patterns and recognize environmental risk factors. The annual surfing competition now features a memorial heat named after Zephyr, where competitors perform aerial maneuvers similar to the one he was attempting during his final moments. A small plaque at Preveli Point bears his name and the inscription, "The ocean gives and takes with equal measure. Respect both gifts." Western Australia's shark management policies underwent significant revision following the incident, with increased funding for non-invasive detection technologies and research into predator behavior patterns. Dr. Kowalski's subsequent studies revealed that the breach and strike method observed in Zephyr's case might be more common than previously understood, representing an evolutionary adaptation to hunting prey at the water's surface. For the surfing community, the morning of March 12, 2009, remains a somber reminder of nature's unpredictable power. Local surfers still ride the breaks at Preveli Point, but few venture out alone during dawn sessions anymore, and many now wear electronic shark deterrent devices. Small tributes to a promising young athlete whose final moments changed how surfers understand their relationship with the ocean's apex predators. The golden shores of a popular western Maui beach had long been considered one of the island's safest swimming destinations. Its clear waters and gentle reef break made it a favorite among tourists and locals alike. For 15 years, head lifeguard Makoa Kealoha had watched over these waters, earning multiple commendations for his dedication to ocean safety and rescue operations. At 42, Makoa's reputation as a guardian of the area was well established throughout the Hawaiian Islands. On the morning of July 18, 2015, conditions at the beach were typical for midsummer. Light trade winds, moderate swells, and excellent water visibility. The beach had filled early with visitors escaping the inland heat, and by 10:30 a.m. Makoa estimated approximately 200 people were in the water along his section of coastline. From his elevated position in the central lifeguard tower, he noticed a middle-aged man struggling against a rip current that had formed overnight near the northern reef edge. The swimmer was later identified as Dmitry Vorobyov, a 56-year-old physician visiting from St. Petersburg, Russia. According to statements from his wife Natalia, Dmitry had considered himself a strong swimmer, but had limited experience with ocean currents. When he found himself being pulled seaward at an alarming rate, he had made the critical mistake of swimming directly against the current, rather than parallel to the shore. Makoa immediately recognized the developing emergency. He activated his radio to alert nearby lifeguard stations, grabbed his rescue buoy, and sprinted into the surf. Witnesses later reported that Makoa covered the 100 meters to the struggling swimmer with remarkable speed, navigating the rip current with practiced efficiency. Upon reaching Dmitry, Makoa found the man exhausted and beginning to panic. He secured the rescue buoy around the swimmer and began guiding him toward safer waters, explaining in calm tones how they would navigate around the current rather than fighting against it. Several beachgoers recorded video of the rescue, initially seeing it as simply another example of the lifeguard's professional skill. What the cameras captured next would subsequently be reviewed by marine biologists and safety officials across the Pacific. As Makoa and Dmitry reached the edge of the rip current, approximately 70 meters from shore, the water beneath them suddenly darkened. Junior lifeguard Kikoa Palama, monitoring from the beach, was the first to spot the distinctive shape of a large tiger shark approaching from deeper water. Before Kikoa could relay a warning through the radio system, the 4.2-meter tiger shark surged upward, clamping its jaws around Makoa's left calf and thigh with devastating force. Underwater footage from a nearby snorkeler's camera later revealed that the shark had been tracking a school of aculi that had moved into the area, a behavior that marine biologists suggested had been exacerbated by unusually warm water temperatures that month. Despite the excruciating pain, Makoa's training took over. Rather than pulling away, which would have caused even more tissue damage, he drove his right fist directly into the shark's sensitive gills, while simultaneously pushing Dmitry toward shallower water. The shark released its grip momentarily, allowing Makoa to place himself between the predator and his rescue subject. The tiger shark circled and approached a second time. Makoa, now bleeding profusely from deep lacerations that exposed bone and severed muscle tissue, struck the animal's snout repeatedly while continuing to back toward shore. The shark made a final pass, grazing Makoa's hip before disappearing into deeper water, likely deterred by the increasing commotion as additional lifeguards entered the area. By the time emergency medical technicians Alana Kiwe and Bryce Nakamura reached the scene, Makoa had successfully guided Dmitry to shallow water, where other lifeguards took over. The lifeguard then collapsed on the wet sand, his left leg mutilated from mid-thigh to ankle. Alana would later testify that Makoa's only words before losing consciousness were a question about whether his rescue subject had reached safety. The medical response that followed demonstrated the island's well-rehearsed shark attack protocols. Lifeguards applied tourniquet pressure while keeping the wound immersed in salt water, a practice recommended for shark bite injuries to reduce infection risk. Helicopter transport delivered Makoa to a medical center on Maui within 17 minutes of the attack, where traumatologist Dr. Wei Chun Zhang led the surgical team in a 9-hour procedure. Miraculously, the tiger shark's teeth had missed Makoa's femoral artery by millimeters. However, the damage to his tibial nerve, muscle tissue, and fibula was extensive. Dr. Zhang later informed reporters that the lifeguard's remarkable physical conditioning had likely saved his life, as the blood volume loss would have been fatal for someone with less cardiovascular capacity. Dmitry Vorobyov remained at Makoa's bedside for 2 days before his scheduled return to Russia, reportedly overcome with emotion at the lifeguard's sacrifice. Before departing, he established a fund to cover Makoa's medical expenses beyond what insurance would provide, eventually contributing over $175,000 towards specialized equipment and rehabilitation services. The recovery process proved grueling. Makoa underwent 4 additional surgeries over the following 18 months, including innovative nerve graft procedures. Physical therapist Lilinoy Kapule worked with him daily, documenting his progress from wheelchair to walker to special carbon fiber bracing. Throughout recovery, Makoa maintained that he had simply been performing his duty and expressed gratitude that both he and his rescue subject had survived. Marine conservation became Makoa's unexpected second calling during his convalescence. Rather than advocating for shark culling, as some community members had demanded, he partnered with marine biologist Dr. Kayla Akina to develop enhanced monitoring systems for tiger shark movements around popular swimming beaches. Their work led to the implementation of drone surveillance protocols that have since been adopted across Hawaii. 14 months after the attack, Makoa returned to limited duty at the beach, primarily serving in a training and supervisory capacity. While his mobility remained compromised, his experience proved invaluable for younger lifeguards. On the first anniversary of the incident, Mayor Keone Kahale presented him with the island's highest civilian honor, acknowledging how his actions had changed protocols for water rescues in shark-inhabited waters throughout the Pacific. The attack fundamentally altered beach safety approaches across Hawaii, with the beach becoming the test site for integrated shark monitoring systems that combined sonar, drone surveillance, and spotter networks. For visitors to Maui's western shores, Makoa Kealoha's story is now shared during standard safety briefings, a powerful reminder that the ocean's beauty comes with inherent risks, and that courage in crisis can make the difference between life and death. The waters of False Bay had earned their ominous reputation long before the events of October 12, 2013. Situated along Cape Town's southeastern coastline, the bay's unique ecosystem supported one of the world's densest populations of great white sharks. The abundance of Cape Fur seals at Seal Island, located in the bay's northern waters, created ideal hunting conditions for these apex predators. Despite this known risk, the area attracted adventure enthusiasts year-round, drawn by its stunning biodiversity and dramatic coastal scenery. Thabo Nkosi, a 34-year-old marine photography consultant from Johannesburg, had organized the ill-fated kayaking expedition as part of a documentary project examining coastal wildlife interactions. A veteran kayaker with extensive open water experience, Thabo had assembled a team of 4 fellow paddlers: environmental journalist Priya Maharaj, marine biology student Callum McGregor, documentary cameraman Hendrik van der Merwe, and local kayak guide Andiswa Madikizela. The group had obtained all necessary permits and had attended a safety briefing about shark behavior the previous evening. Their planned route would take them from Miller's Point along the eastern shoreline of False Bay towards Seal Island, though their permit restricted them from approaching within 300 meters of the island itself. Weather conditions that Saturday morning seemed favorable: light southeasterly winds, good visibility, and moderate swells of less than 1 meter. The expedition launched at 7:15 a.m., with each kayaker equipped with a wetsuit, personal flotation device, and waterproof communication radio. For the first hour, the excursion proceeded smoothly. Thabo documented several Cape Fur seals playing in the surf, while Priya recorded notes about coastal bird populations for her upcoming environmental article. According to later testimony, Andiswa had twice noted dark shapes moving in deeper water off their port side, but had not considered them an immediate concern, as great whites typically hunted at Seal Island rather than along the coastal paddling route. At approximately 8:40 a.m., the group paused about 800 meters offshore to observe a pod of dolphins moving across the bay. Hendrik had just repositioned his kayak to capture better footage when witnesses reported seeing a massive disturbance in the water less than 10 meters away. Without warning, a 4.7-meter great white shark breached almost entirely out of the water in what marine biologists would later describe as a classic hunting behavior typically reserved for seal predation. The shark's momentum carried it directly into the side of Thabo's kayak. The impact immediately capsized the vessel, throwing him into the cold waters of the bay. Before anyone could react, the great white had circled back and seized Thabo's right arm and upper torso in its powerful jaws. Hendrik, positioned closest to the attack, reported that the initial strike happened so quickly that Thabo had no time to cry out. The shark submerged with Thabo for approximately 8 seconds before resurfacing. During this brief but critical interval, Andiswa managed to maneuver her kayak alongside the struggling man. As the shark released its grip to reposition for another strike, she reached out and grabbed Thabo's wetsuit collar, dragging him partially across her kayak's deck. Callum immediately paddled to her assistance, and together they pulled Thabo onto Callum's more stable expedition kayak. Priya, maintaining remarkable composure, implemented their emergency protocol, using her paddle to splash forcefully while shouting to create auditory deterrence. This tactic, recommended during their safety briefing, may have contributed to the shark's decision not to pursue further attacks as the group hastily retreated toward shore. Thabo remained conscious throughout the ordeal, but had sustained catastrophic injuries. The shark's teeth had sheared through his wetsuit and inflicted deep lacerations across his right shoulder, arm, and rib cage. Multiple ribs were fractured, and his humerus had been crushed by the pressure of the shark's jaws. Most critically, the attack had severed major blood vessels, causing rapid blood loss that threatened his life within minutes. Andiswa used her marine emergency training to apply pressure bandages fashioned from first aid supplies and torn pieces of a wetsuit. Meanwhile, Hendrik contacted emergency services via their marine radio. A rescue boat was dispatched from a nearby station in Simonstown, while a medical evacuation helicopter was mobilized from Cape Town. The rescue vessel intercepted the kayakers approximately 12 minutes after the attack, finding them just 300 meters from shore. Paramedic Zola Tambo later reported that Thabo had lost nearly 2 liters of blood by the time they transferred him to the rescue craft. The helicopter arrived as they reached the beach, enabling a rapid evacuation to a hospital where surgical teams were already preparing for his arrival. The following 11 hours involved 3 separate surgical procedures. Dr. Adrian Basson, the lead trauma surgeon, later informed reporters that Thabo had required more than 300 sutures to close his wounds. Orthopedic specialists inserted titanium plates to stabilize his shattered humerus, while vascular surgeons worked to repair damaged blood vessels, though doctors initially feared they might need to amputate his arm. Innovative microsurgery techniques allowed them to preserve the limb, albeit with significantly reduced functionality. During Thabo's extended recovery, marine biologists identified several factors that may have contributed to this unusual coastal attack. The kayak's low silhouette in the water resembling seal profiles from below. Unusual seal movements that day forcing sharks to hunt beyond their typical grounds. And the possibility that the specific shark had been one previously tagged and identified as exhibiting more exploratory hunting behaviors than others in the bay. 3 months after the incident, Thabo held a press conference from his rehabilitation facility in Johannesburg. Despite his ordeal and permanent disability, he expressed a measured perspective on the attack, acknowledging that the expedition had knowingly entered the territory of an apex predator. He advocated against culling programs, instead emphasizing the need for better education and monitoring systems for recreational water users. The False Bay incident prompted significant changes to South African maritime regulations regarding kayaking expeditions in known shark territories. New requirements included mandatory shark spotters on elevated positions for group excursions, improved communication equipment, and restrictions on early morning and late afternoon paddling, when lighting conditions make it difficult for sharks to distinguish kayaks from prey species. Today, a weathered paddle mounted at Miller's Point launch site serves as a subtle reminder of the encounter. It bears no dramatic inscription, only Thabo's name and the date. But local guides ensure that every kayaker who passes understands its significance. For those who venture into False Bay's waters, it represents nature's fundamental truth, that we enter wild spaces as visitors, not conquerors, and must accept both their beauty and their danger on their own terms. A river in the highlands of western Madagascar winds its way through limestone landscapes before emptying into the Mozambique Channel, creating a complex estuarine ecosystem where freshwater and marine environments converge. For generations, a nearby small fishing village has depended on these waters for sustenance and livelihood, with local knowledge of river conditions passed down from parents to children as essential survival information. Razafindra Koto Manansoa, known throughout the community as a skilled fisherman and devoted father, had lived his entire 43 years along the river's banks. Having lost his wife to malaria 2 years earlier, he had become the sole provider and caretaker for his 8-year-old son, Tantili. Despite the region's widespread poverty, Razafindra Koto had maintained a reputation for generosity, often sharing his catch with elderly neighbors and teaching fishing techniques to village children. July 3, 2011 began like countless days before it. The early morning air hung heavy with humidity as Razafindra Koto prepared his wooden pirogue for the day's fishing. Seasonal rains had swollen the river and recent coastal storms had pushed unusually saline water further upstream than normal conditions that local elders later recalled should have raised concerns, but which had gone unremarked at the time. At approximately 9:45 a.m., after securing his morning catch, Razafindra Koto brought Tantali to a shallow inlet where generations of Ambatalampi children had learned to swim. The protected cove, roughly a kilometer upriver from the estuary, had historically been considered safe from both strong currents and predators. Village elder Ravalomanana Haja later reported that no shark encounters had ever been documented this far upstream in living memory. According to Tantali's subsequent account, his father had been standing waist-deep in the silty water, holding the boy's hands while teaching him to float on his back, when the attack occurred. Without warning or visible approach, a large bull shark, later estimated by marine biologists to be approximately 2.8 meters in length, surged from the murky depths and clamped its jaws around Razafindra upper thigh. The initial strike severed the femoral artery and fractured the femur. Witnesses on the riverbank, including fisherman Rakotondrebe Solofo and his 14-year-old daughter Hanitra, described how Razafindra first and only action was to thrust Tantali toward the shore with remarkable force, propelling the child safely into shallower water. The shark immediately dragged Razafindra beneath the surface in a violent whirl of reddening water. Tantali's screams alerted the entire village. Within minutes, nearly 20 men had launched pirogues and were searching the river with spears and nets. Solofo, who had served as a medic during his military service, reached Tantali first and carried the traumatized child to higher ground, checking him for injuries while other villagers continued the search for his father. The river's strong current and poor visibility hampered rescue efforts. 3 hours later, fisherman Andrea Mihaja Njaka and his cousin Ranaivo Mampionona discovered Razafindra body caught among mangrove roots nearly half a kilometer downstream. Medical examination later confirmed what the community had already feared. He had died within minutes of the attack from catastrophic blood loss and drowning. The shark had inflicted multiple bite wounds across his lower body, consistent with the feeding pattern of bull sharks. News of the tragedy spread quickly through regional government offices, eventually reaching marine biologist Dr. Rakotonarina Patrice. Having studied bull shark behavior in Madagascar's waterways for over a decade, Dr. Rakotonarina immediately traveled to Ambatolampy to investigate the unprecedented attack. His subsequent report to the A Research Council identified several contributing factors to the unusual predator behavior. Coastal construction had disrupted traditional shark migration patterns, while unusually heavy rainfall had reduced the river's salinity gradient. The water beneath the barrier that typically prevented marine predators from venturing so far upstream, its sleek body. Most significantly, local fishermen had recently begun cleaning their catch closer to the swimming area, inadvertently creating a scent corridor that attracted predators. For Tantali, the aftermath brought profound changes. With no remaining immediate family, he was taken in by his father's cousin, Razafindrabe Mihaja, who operated a small market stall in the coastal city of Morondava. Community leaders organized a traditional Famadihana ceremony to honor Razafindra, celebrating his final act of sacrifice while establishing a small trust from communal resources to support Tantali's future education, a rarity in a region where less than 40% of children completed primary school. The attack fundamentally altered the relationship between Ambatolampy's residents and their river. Village elders, working with regional officials, established new safety protocols. Swimming was prohibited during the wet season when river salinity changed. Designated lookouts were posted during water collection hours, and children were no longer permitted in the water without adult supervision. Local fisherman Andrea Maharianjiva crafted simple wooden platforms extending from the banks to allow water collection without direct river entry. Dr. Rakotonarina used the incident to secure government funding for educational programs throughout Madagascar's coastal communities. His team created illustrated guides explaining bull shark behavior and risk factors, emphasizing the species' unique ability to tolerate fresh water and travel far upstream into river systems. These materials, distributed to over 200 villages, included special instructions for identifying environmental conditions that might indicate increased shark presence. 5 years after the tragedy, Tantali returned to Ambatolampy for the first time since leaving with his uncle. Now 13 and enrolled in school, he participated in the village's newly established annual River Safety Day, which began with a solemn recognition of his father's sacrifice. In a brief speech to gathered children, delivered in a voice barely audible over the river's constant flow, Tantali shared the most important lesson from his loss: that understanding and respecting nature's power matters more than fearing it. A simple wooden marker now stands near the attack site, bearing Razafindra name and the local Malagasy proverb, "The water knows its own depth." For the children of Ambatolampy, their parents now ensure they know it too. Situated 240 kilometers off the coast of Mexico's Baja California Peninsula, a remote island had become the premier destination for great white shark research and observation. By the late 2010s, Dr. Nikolai Volkov had dedicated his professional life to studying these apex predators. At 38, the Russian-born marine biologist had published groundbreaking research on great white hunting behaviors through his position in an Institute of Oceanography. His current project, developing non-invasive satellite tagging methods to better track shark migrations, had brought him to Guadalupe Island aboard the research vessel Orca's Promise on November 7, 2019. The expedition team included 4 fellow researchers: behavioral ecologist Dr. Juanita Herrera, veterinary specialist Dr. Marcus Tolberg, graduate assistant Fatima Alzarani, and underwater cinematographer Xavier Dupont. The team had spent 9 days documenting and tagging sharks around the island's northern perimeter, where water temperatures and prey availability created ideal conditions for great white aggregation. On the morning of their final research day, weather conditions appeared perfect. Water visibility extended beyond 30 meters. Surface conditions remained calm, and 8 different great whites had already been identified circling the vessel. Dr. Volkov prepared for his 3rd cage dive of the expedition, during which he planned to deploy 2 remaining satellite tags using a specialized pneumatic applicator he had designed specifically for this purpose. The reinforced aluminum dive cage used by the research team had been custom-built to exacting specifications, featuring double-locking hatches and cross-braced steel support bars, rated for impacts exceeding 2,000 kilograms of force. Though such cages were considered industry-standard safety equipment, several recent incidents involving commercial dive operators had raised concerns about their vulnerability to determined shark investigations. At 11:17 a.m., Dr. Volkov entered the cage accompanied by Fatima, who would assist with the tagging equipment, while Xavier filmed from an adjacent cage. Ship Captain Eduardo Mendoza and First Mate Diego Fuentes monitored from above, while the remaining scientists managed the data collection systems on the main deck. Standard safety protocols dictated that no bait or chum would be used during the scientific tagging process to avoid associating the cage with feeding opportunities. Approximately 22 minutes into the dive, an exceptionally large female great white, later identified as a previously documented individual designated Typhoon, based on her distinctive dorsal fin scarring, approached the cage with unusual directness. At an estimated 5.7 meters in length, Typhoon ranked among the largest great whites documented in the region and had demonstrated notably bold behavior during previous research encounters. According to Xavier, the massive shark initially circled the cage twice at a distance of approximately 4 meters. Then, in a behavior rarely observed, she approached head-on toward the front viewing panel, appearing to focus intently on Dr. Volkov's movements inside. Dr. Herrera, observing from the vessel, later theorized that the shark may have been investigating the electronic signals from the tagging equipment, which emitted low-frequency pulses similar to those produced by injured prey. Without warning, Typhoon suddenly accelerated directly into the cage with extraordinary force. The impact bent 2 of the main supporting bars and caused a catastrophic failure of the upper hatch lock. As the cage tilted sideways from the strike, Dr. Volkov lost his balance. In the confusion, his right arm extended through the damaged upper section of the cage. The shark immediately seized the opportunity, clamping its jaws around his exposed forearm and elbow. Crew members reported hearing Dr. Volkov's agonized scream even from above the water. Fatima, showing remarkable presence of mind, activated her emergency signaling device while simultaneously striking at the shark's sensitive gills with her camera housing, a desperate tactic covered in their emergency protocols. The combined effects of the electrical signal and physical deterrent appeared to confuse the shark momentarily. She released Dr. Volkov's arm but continued circling the now severely compromised cage. Captain Mendoza immediately initiated emergency extraction procedures, ordering the immediate raising of both cages while Diego deployed the acoustic shark deterrent system. As the damaged cage broke the surface, crew members could see that Dr. Volkov's arm had been catastrophically injured. The shark's serrated teeth had severed muscles, crushed his elbow joint, and fractured both radius and ulna. Despite excruciating pain, he maintained enough composure to instruct the crew on applying a proper tourniquet using his own research belt, while Fatima stabilized the limb against further movement. The Orca's Promise was equipped with advanced medical supplies, including plasma and a satellite communication system linked to emergency medical services. Dr. Tullberg, whose veterinary training included emergency medicine, administered morphine for pain while establishing an intravenous line to combat developing shock. Captain Mendoza immediately set course for the Mexican mainland, while sending emergency coordinates for potential helicopter evacuation. Weather conditions prevented air evacuation, forcing the vessel to make the 3-hour journey to Ensenada at maximum speed. Throughout the transit, Dr. Volkov remained conscious, even dictating research notes about the encounter to Fatima, behavior his colleagues would later describe as quintessentially Nikolai. Upon reaching port, an ambulance transported him directly to a hospital, where surgeons worked for 11 hours to save his arm. Despite their best efforts, the damage proved too extensive. 3 days later, orthopedic specialists performed an above-elbow amputation. The international scientific community rallied around their colleague, establishing the Volkov Research Fund, which raised over $340,000 for his medical expenses and continued research. In the aftermath, the incident sparked intense debate about cage diving safety standards. A comprehensive investigation was conducted, resulting in new guidelines for research cage construction that included additional reinforcement points and emergency release mechanisms. The bent cage segments from Dr. Volkov's encounter were preserved as teaching tools for future marine researchers. Perhaps most surprisingly to outside observers, Dr. Volkov returned to shark research just 7 months after the attack. Working with prosthetic specialists, he designed a waterproof arm attachment that allowed him to continue underwater work, though he no longer entered shark cages. In his first public lecture following recovery, he emphasized that the incident resulted from a confluence of factors rather than the aggressive behavior of the shark itself. Dr. Herrera's subsequent paper, co-authored with Dr. Volkov during his recovery, proposed that the shark had demonstrated problem-solving behavior by striking at the cage's most vulnerable junction points, suggesting a level of tactical assessment previously unrecognized in the species. By 2021, Dr. Volkov had established the Clearwater Initiative, which developed remote underwater tagging systems that eliminated the need for human presence during shark research. He frequently cited his experience as a painful but necessary evolution in human understanding of these powerful creatures. During a documentary interview commemorating the initiative's first successful deployment, he displayed the titanium prosthetic arm he now used for diving, its outer casing marked with a small but precise engraving of a great white silhouette. He remarked while adjusting the prosthetic that sometimes it took an encounter like his to remind them that they had much to learn about respecting the boundaries between their world and theirs.